Thanks. Mic check, can you hear me? All right. So the biggest thing about this is that as far as TED Talks go is I'm going to have notes. Usually in TED Talks, they don't have notes. And so Brad called me about 3 weeks ago and said, hey, I need you to do this. And being a Marine officer that he is, I'm the enlisted, so it's pretty much an order, right? And I said, well, I'm actually out of town that week, so I can't do it. And he said, well, it won't go off without you. So I had to make some changes, and luckily my work obliged, and I was able to change it and make it here. So just getting right into it, 2005, we were deploying to Iraq. We knew we were going to deploy to Iraq. Anytime that you have a deployment, the Marines usually have a 6-month workup. And during that 6-month workup, we're training as we're going to go fight. We're doing everything that we can to make it realistic. In my platoon, we had about 20 to 25 Marines, depending on any type of attachments that we would have with us. Average age for the reserve unit was 21, so a little bit older than our active duty counterparts. But we're training. We even went to, they have studios out in California where they have actors, and they have simulation villages where you can interact, and the actors are speaking Farsi, Arabic, and any type of situation that we might encounter, they're trying to simulate for us. So we get realistic training. That's one thing that we need to do. Just as Marines or humans, anything that we're doing, we should be trying to simulate that, and that's one thing that we're doing. So that's about a 6-month workup, going from about September through March. March, we fly. We fly into Kuwait, and then we eventually get up into Iraq. And so we were stationed at Camp Fallujah. We weren't there for the Battle of Fallujah that most of you see about in documentaries. It was after the fact, but we still had residual fighting going on around the area of operation. But we got there about mid-March, and the first thing that we have to do is we have to do a turnover with the unit that we're relieving. So we have to do this left seat, right seat. And basically the left seat, we go out with the unit. It's most of their platoon and the key leadership from our platoon, because we're trying to learn from them how they operate within that area of operation. And we go out for about 2 or 3 days with them, come back, and then we get to take control of the next mission, another 2 to 3 day mission. Basically, our platoon is running the show now, and then we go out for 2 or 3 days, and they have their key leadership go with us, and basically critiquing us, advising us of what we could do better to improve our readiness while we're out there, and then we come back. And so we're inside Camp Fallujah for about a week before it's our turn to go out, and this brings us to right about the first part of April. So we go out on our own mission. It's the first time that we're out by ourselves. Beginning of the deployment, we have 7 months ago, and we go out. We take over a forward operating base, a FOB, and basically what that was, it was a house. It's somebody's house. Imagine being in your house, a unit comes in and say, hey, we need to borrow your house for a little while, we'll give you some money. And most of the time they oblige and say, okay, and most of the time we have to still give them money and say, okay, now you really have to leave. So we take it over, and anytime we're out there, we're vehicle mounted, so we have 5 vehicles, so everybody knows we're in the area of operation. And again, this is first part of April, and let's see, the night of 3rd April, we decided that we're going to move, and the one thing that we wanted to do in a vehicle with the IEDs that are out there, we wanted to stay off the roadways, because that's where all the IEDs were happening. So we get our lead vehicle. The vehicle commander for that was Sergeant Smith at the time. We call him Smitty. We plan our route, and the route pretty much has us going straight across the desert, middle of nowhere, away from the roadway, and we decide that's how we're going to go. So morning of April 4th, we start heading out. Smitty's leading, and then we have 4 other vehicles, and when we're talking over the radio, we're calling Vics, Vic 1, Vic 2, and our call sign for the platoon was Gunfighter 3, and so if they're coming over the radio, they might say Gunfighter 3-1, hey, this is 3-1 or -1, -2, all the way down. And I was telling Charlie, I was in an up-armored Humvee, and basically when you're in an up-armored Humvee, the only thing for the passenger to see out of is a 12-by-12 window, so not a lot going on. So we're heading out, and we'd been traveling for a while across the desert, and it's probably about noon, and all of a sudden we hear I hear a big explosion. And about that time, I hear a gunner that's sitting up there on the gun. He said, "Hey, Vic 1 is hit." And so at that point in time, all this training that we've had before, we're starting to think, we kind of go into muscle memory and we start moving around. But in my head, as soon as he said Vic 1 is hit, I hear the call come over the radio. And on the radio, I hear Smitty saying, "Hey, I've got 3 WIAs and I've got a KIA." And when you hear the KIA, the WIAs we can handle because we got corpsmen, we can fix them, we can do something, we can get them out. But when you hear a KIA on your very first mission out the wire, it's just like, crap. We got 7 more months of this. And then everybody just started moving like that we were trained. I jump out, and as I'm jumping out, I hear him call out the kill number of who it was. And the way the kill numbers work is it's the first initial of our last name, followed by the last 4 of our social. And the first thing I hear is Kilo, and so I know it's Jeremiah. And so I'm running up to the vehicle. We don't know if we're getting follow-on attacks, because normally with IEDs, you're going to get a follow-on attack, but our first mission was to make sure that those guys were okay. And then the rest of the platoon, they're moving around, getting into some type of security position. I'm running up there. I've got a corpsman with me. And on the way, I grab another team leader from another vehicle, and I'm pulling him with me. And so we're heading up there, and the first thing I want you guys to see is, so this is the vehicle that Smitty and them were in. It was a non-up-armored vehicle. They intentionally chose that. We let the team leaders, that's the way we ran our platoon, the team leaders choose their own vehicle. Back then, it was 05, still kind of beginning of the war, and so the up-armors were not as prevalent as they were later on. So they chose this one more for situational awareness. You can see it's an open top. We got the front left as a driver, Peter, Smitty's in the front right, and then we had the guy, three guys in the back. So as we're running up there, I'm approaching them, and this is pretty much what I see. It's like a beer can, right? It's aluminum. So that is the vehicle that. And looking back on it, after we kind of did a debrief about it, being in that vehicle probably saved more lives than had they been in an up armor. Because if they would have been in an up armor, a big explosion goes off. Imagine holding a firecracker in your hand and it going off, right? So it actually probably saved, even though we had some guys, we had Del Rio lost both of his legs. We lost Kenshin. Barkley lost one of his, and then one of our engineers had some severe skin graft issues. A lot of his arm was removed. But that's what we wound up coming up on. And so when we walked up there, that's what we came up on. And the one thing that I remember vividly, I remember the radio call. The second thing is I was coming up there, I see that the corpsmen were all taking care of what they were supposed to be doing, but about 200 meters to the right was Kenshin's body. And the one thing that I remember, as me and Smiley were going over there, we went to the vehicle, we grabbed the body bag, and we go up to Kenshin. And the one thing that I remember about him, out of everybody that was in that vehicle, he was the only one that didn't look like he was hurt, because he was sitting right above the blast when it went off. He looked peaceful. He looked like he was sleeping. And I thought at any minute that, hey, he's gonna wake up and say, hey, I'm good. But it wasn't. So that was our very first mission. So at that point in time, we had to decide as a platoon what's our next thing, because we're going to be here for 7 months. We got everybody in 360. We waited on our medevac. Medevac finally, it took almost 3 hours to get a medevac bird. And that, while we were there, it gave us a lot of time to reflect. So medevac finally came in. We got our guys out. We found it was a close by small operating base, a true operating base, with security contractors who were working security for us. And so we were able to go in there and just let our guard down and just bed down for the night, all that adrenaline. It was probably about midnight before we finally went in. So we started early that morning. Probably about midnight, we finally got to where we needed to go. Next morning, we wake up and we say, okay, here's the deal. Anytime we do a debrief, it's a no-rank debrief. So if I mess something up, the lowest man in the platoon can say, hey, Dornak, you messed something up. And that's the way we ran it. And so from that point on, we just had conversation, how we were feeling. And it was just so important for us to figure things out. And so we had two choices that next morning. We can cower down and be done and just kind of check ourselves out. Obviously, we're still going to have to do some missions. Or we can do what we had been training to do for the past 6 months, and that was to take the fight to the enemy. And so that's what we decided to do. And from that point on, every mission that we rolled out on, we knew that we were fighting an enemy. One, we didn't know who the enemy was because it was now the insurgency. That was probably the hardest thing, is fighting an enemy that you don't know. Whereas in 2003, we knew who they were. But we decided from that point on that we would take the battle to the enemy. Never would we fight on their terms. We would fight on our terms the way we had been trained to do. And so that's what we did for the next 7 months, and it was pretty successful. So that was the impact that it had on us. And then, so what can you learn from this? And that was one thing that I kept thinking about, like, what can somebody that wasn't part of Gunfighter 3 learn from this? I think there's several things that you guys can learn from. The biggest thing is that we're all fighting an enemy one way or another, whether it's a physical enemy or an emotional or mental enemy. There's always some type of battle going on that we can learn from and that we can learn how to fight that. The biggest thing that I'd like for you to take away from this is, and just me trying to reflect over the past 3 weeks of what to say, is what did I take away from it? And here's what I took away, and I hope that you take it too. Take the opportunity to be a friend to those you lead, be it your kids, your wife, your neighbor, a coworker. No matter who it is, be a friend to them. No matter what type of leadership position that you're in, there's always an opportunity to be a friend. There is a time to lead, even though they might be your friend, but there's also a better time to be a friend. Take the opportunity to listen to those that you lead. You'd be surprised what you can learn. As Bobby said, I have 4 girls, 4 amazing daughters. Youngest is 8, and the oldest is 14. We moved down here for our youngest daughter. She has a severe speech disorder, and I will tell you that I learn more from her because every day when she talks, she has to fight for every single word that comes out of that mouth. And that is something, just going back to those you lead, I learned so much from Kobe than I'd probably say anybody else that I come in contact with, and just the way she fights. And then, of course, I've got 3 other daughters up to a freshman in high school. And just learning from those that you lead, listening to them, you'd be surprised what you would learn. Be patient with those you lead. When it comes time to making a decision, don't rush a decision unless it's a life and death situation, obviously. But there's never anything that you guys are doing that's so important that you have to you have to be impatient with making a decision. One thing that I learned from these guys here, this is our platoon, Gunfighter 3, is to love deeply and love fiercely. Right now, we live in a society, everybody knows what it's like right now. But just love those guys that you're leading, or the people that you're leading, your family or whoever it is. Love them deeply, love them fiercely. It's not a sign of weakness to love a fellow brother, a fellow sister, or whatever it is. Love deeply, love fiercely. And then the biggest thing is don't have regrets about any of your decisions, especially if you can learn from it. This picture is probably the biggest regret I have of 2005, and I'll tell you why. The 3 weeks that we were in country prior to April 4th, myself and Captain Harron kept saying, hey, we need to get a platoon photo. Let's get a platoon photo. And one of the things that I remember the night in the fob after Jeremiah was killed, when Harron and I was outside just shooting the breeze and talking about things, as I said, sir, we didn't get a platoon photo. So this is the only platoon photo we have. It's got Jeremiah in it, and we're missing 4 other guys. But I learned from that, and that's to seize every opportunity that you can. When the time's given, take that opportunity and seize it. So that's what I've got for right now. Bobby and Brad, I really appreciate you letting me do this. What I will tell you guys, as far as my platoon goes, I told them I was doing this. This is the first time that I've ever shared this outside of the platoon. And so this is me taking the battle, because this is stuff that weighs on my heart a lot. And the way you do it is you got to face your enemy, right? And so this is me facing the enemy by sharing with you guys. And I appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity.
It's a huge honor to be here, be able to speak amongst these veterans and all you beautiful people out here, seeing strong men come together. It's real inspiring. I have to look at notes. I've never seen TED Talk. I don't watch a lot of TV, and I don't have a good memory. So, all right. I've been in the Texas Army National Guard as a paratrooper for the last 9 years. I got in the military very late in my life. But I've been doing jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, for 24 years. All forms of the real martial arts that work. I've had my own school for the last 17 years. Two are very similar, all right? Both prepare you for combat. One a little more serious than the other. Both make you comfortable at being very uncomfortable. Both give you a mission and a team and put you around like-minded individuals, all right? Now, back to the martial arts. Jiu-jitsu is not a normal martial art. You're not going to see little 7-year-olds with black belts. We don't break fake boards. We choke each other. We bend each other's arm until people scream and tap out. But we love each other. So it's nothing personal. Even the guy in the cage, got a lot of respect for him, you know. He gave me the honor to share the cage in a special moment with him. Don't want to hurt anybody. Prepared to hurt them, but don't want to. So it's usually when we train, beating each other up, it's usually the best time of your life. You know, everybody here agrees. They're like, yeah, I see the guys in the back shaking, you know. It's no big deal choking each other, you know, as long as you tap out in time. All right. The people that stick with it are usually really successful. And that's what, I'm nobody special, but I've been around a lot of really remarkable people over the years teaching people. I've taught Navy SEALs. We have Navy SEALs, Green Berets, CEOs, convicts, former drug addicts, every walk of life, grandparents, autistic kids, all colors, creeds, and beliefs, but we're all together on the mat, going through hard times together, lifting each other up, helping each other become better people. So I met some amazing people. I've trained probably 500 to 7,500 people over the years. People come and go, but the few people that stick around, I remember all 30 of them. All right. I grew up in church, but it was just a habitual thing. Mom would take me to church. I would go. I believe in God, believe in Jesus, understood. But I was always uncomfortable and felt like I didn't belong. Felt like it was a bunch of hypocrites. I could never live up to that. I'm a sinner. I think bad things. I do bad stuff. I don't know. I believe hopefully that's enough. Until one of my students really got after me and explained that being a Christian, you're still going to be a sinner. You're still going to make mistakes. You're just going to try to live for a bigger purpose than yourself. So I became baptized after I was, I think, like 33, 34. So much later in my life. And it was one of the most amazing moments, which I know a lot of you have experienced, if not all of you. I was competing and training a lot. I still am. But I was on my way to Brazil, World Championships, and I just got baptized, training so hard, best shape of my life. This is going to be the year. All right. Go to Brazil. Not many other Americans around there. Shake hands with the opponent. 10 seconds later, match over, looking up at the lights. What happened? At that moment, I realized God's not a genie. Okay? You can pray and pray and pray, and if it's not his time, it's not going to be your time either. So that's something that's like you all have to learn. We all are going to go through struggles and hardships. And there's a reason for it we might not all understand. Fast forward many years later, I won much bigger tournaments, and all the glory to God. Those losses will make you stronger or will make you a quitter, all right? Choose to make your losses to make you a stronger man, okay? Military and jiu-jitsu both have a mission to accomplish. We as men, I believe we're made to be warriors, protectors, and we have missions to accomplish. Today's society is punishing what it is to be a man, punishing masculinity, punishing freedom, punishing what makes this country great, a place where dreams can come true no matter who you are if you work for it. Some people that have given me my career have been people that have immigrated from other countries, opened doors for me, and I'm doing the same for others. So anything is possible here. You've got to have that mission. A lot of reasons why I got into the military at a much later age, because I teach a lot of veterans. A lot of veterans come home, and at a young age, they might be in a leadership position, in charge of millions of dollars of equipment, in charge of other men's lives. And they come home, and they don't get the respect or the jobs or the opportunities that they deserve, so they lose that mission. It's important to have that mission, so we get them involved and give them goals to chase and achieve and to better themselves and put them around a brotherhood of like-minded people. We try to provide that in our school, and I know here at Kingsland Baptist, as you can see right now, they're doing it right now. Putting like-minded individuals together, building each other up, making each other stronger. I'm a very goal-oriented person. I like to push myself hard. I'm not afraid to fail. People think that I'm crazy at 47 years old, going to Ranger School next year. I'm jumping out of airplanes. Again, I'm not afraid to fail, because I know God's going to be there to pick me up. I've had some scary moments in my life, whether I'm facing across an opponent in a cage, or I've had a parachute malfunction where my chute has gotten twisted with another jumper out of a C-17 at 800 feet, falling 18 feet per second. And I pull my reserve, and I hit the ground right then. And my breath is knocked out. I'm hurt. I'm semi-unconscious, and I hear a kid screaming for his life. Immediately, I'm okay. I can move my legs. I take his harness off, and we get him off in the ambulance. So I know that God was with me, and I know I'm always going to be okay. Eventually, everyone is going to be okay if you're in the right place with God. Despite having accomplished a lot, I've had to deal with anxiety, depression, and just unfulfillment, right? And people look at me on this earth, I'm a pretty successful person. I've got everything that most people would love to have, but I've had these issues. A lot of people don't even know about that. It's because my mission sometimes will be very self-oriented, selfish in a lot of ways. Even though it's helping other people, a lot of time I'm chasing and fighting my own demons instead of trying to fulfill God's mission. So I have to always try to recenter myself and focus on blessing or being an honorable man for God, bring people to God, living the way God would want us to live. What would Jesus do? I believe God wants us all to be warriors and be successful, and he'll give you a platform to be successful as long as you're honoring him. So I challenge all men to be warriors, to be the dad that you wish you had, to be the best husband you can, to be the best brother you can, to be a force multiplier, not a liability, all right? Create opportunities for others, be strong, be fit, look and live the part of what it means to be a man and a disciple of Christ. It's time for us to wake up as men and get after it, all right? I'm Jeff Messina. That's my story.
I had a way I wanted to start, but I'm going to change it just for a moment because Jeff and Mark, you've blessed me for the opportunity to work with you the last few weeks as we talked about what we're going to discuss this evening. So men, thank you, Jeff and Mark, for allowing me to be a part of this and for you to bless our men here at Kingsland. It's a quote I want to read to you that you see on the screen. Everything in war is simple, but the simplest thing is difficult. The difficulties accumulate and end by producing a kind of friction that is inconceivable unless one has experienced war. Karl von Clausewitz. General Clausewitz was a Prussian general in the 1800s, a military theorist. If you look at a lot of our doctrine today across all services, you'll see his fingerprints on every part of it. And what Clausewitz is describing right here is a type of friction, an uncertainty that's seen on the battlefield. Now, people have different meanings and words for it, and the phrase that I was brought up in the Marine Corps to describe this is fog of war. The fog of war. And everyone who's ever stood on a battlefield, even the greatest warriors, will tell you that it's extremely complex, and it's uncertain. Distances are hard to judge. Even sights and sounds that one person in this vehicle or this fighting hole can have a totally different experience than the one to his left or right, thus making even the understanding of what just happened or what could happen even more difficult. It's the fog of war. So what happens is military forces around the world is they try to reduce this by doctrine, by training, by military intelligence, by the use of technology and friendly tracking systems. But what everyone will tell you that's been on the battlefield is, yes, we can reduce this fog, but we can never eliminate it. So what happens? What happens when fog of war meets one of the largest sandstorms in the history of Iraq? In March 25, 2003, a large low-pressure cyclone, it took dust from Egypt and Saudi Arabia and had the largest sandstorm in 50 years in Iraq. Our forces were there right then. So what happened is it brought an actual orange and yellow haze for about 3 to 4 days. Visibility was limited to about 10 meters in front of your face, and so aviation support, the helicopters, the airplanes couldn't fly. Vehicles were actually limited on what could do. And if you can imagine, as the wind continued to blow, is this dirt, this dust, this grime got in every crevice of every vehicle, every weapon, and every part of your body. And this lasted for 3 days. For 3 days. At this point in time, as my unit was outside a city called Al-Nazariya, we've been supporting a group. We were part of a group called Task Force Tarawa, and there was a battalion that had been involved in some heavy fighting in that city. For those that remember, maybe you're a little older in the room, there's a young lady by the name of Private Jessica Lynch. See, the military had not planned to go into Al-Nazariya. This was a city that was located about 200 miles southeast of Baghdad, had about 500,000 people involved, but unfortunately an army convoy, a resupply convoy, had taken a wrong turn and it went into Al-Nazariya. They were ambushed. A number of soldiers died and a number were captured. If you remember in the news, it was really noteworthy because our Special Operation Forces were able to go in and rescue Private Jessica Lynch and a few others, and it was the first successful POW rescue since World War II and the first ever of a female. But this is where we were, outside Nazariya. Let's go back to this fog. During one of these evenings, when the fog was slowly starting to die down, as our unit came under attack by some Saddam loyalists. Our battalion operations officer, he was a brilliant man, so he immediately began to give directions and orders to where people should go, where certain companies should go, certain platoons should go, and he gave an order for an attached LAV unit that we had to flank the enemy and do a counterassault. This is an LAV, a light armored reconnaissance vehicle. An amazing vehicle. It's got some small amphibious capabilities, but what it brings to the fight is on the front of it, it's got a 25 millimeter Bushmaster cannon. Flanking that on the left and right are two M240 7.62 machine guns. This is a bad dude. This is a bad dude. And I was proud that we had these guys in our unit. But let's go back to this fog of war. You know, on the battlefield is the soldier really only has 3 things to do. If you break it down to its simplest form, a soldier must shoot, move, and communicate. And man, in the middle of this sandstorm, in the middle of the complexity and the evening, the fog of war, on this day, one of the hardest things for us to do was communicate. So what happened was this. As we began engaging the enemy was engaging us. The LAV platoon that went to counterattack and flank, unfortunately, saw us firing at the enemy in the night and the haze and began to fire at us. Friendly fire. Thankfully, as we didn't receive any KIAs, as Mark talked about earlier, but a number of our Marines were wounded. It took about 15 minutes for us to be able to work out the situation and to have them cease fire, and then we were able to repel the enemy's assault. But as you can imagine, this was extremely tough on our unit. Our battalion commander, he got on the hook, and he had all platoon commanders and above report to the COC at about 4 that morning. I remember walking into the COC, there's this big green tent that's dirty. It's been tied down with sandbags. It had bullet holes in it from the day's events. The young officers, as we stood on the back row, some of the field grade officers sat in the front, and then our commanding officer sat on a stool facing all of us. And we waited. We had to wait a few minutes because the captain that was in charge of the LAV unit, he had the farthest to come. So he was the last one to enter. But we all knew what was going to happen. We knew that friendly fire was you can't tolerate it. That this young man would be relieved of duty. Maybe he would be reassigned to a staff job. Someone else would have to take a position of leadership within his platoon. This is what had to happen. It was reasonable and understandable. But if this young captain walked into the room, something that none of us believed would happen occurred. Our commanding officer, a man that I loved dearly, he stood up. He walked over to this young Marine who was about 4 inches taller than him, and he gave him a huge hug. For a moment, they weren't commanding officer to subordinate officer. It was almost a father and son moment. Our CO took what only a dad can do and then put his hands around this young man's face, and he said, "It's okay." And then he went and he pointed to all of us sitting in the room and said, we forgive you. We forgive you. He put his hands back up on the young officer's face and said, "I still need you in this fight. Will you still fight with me?" Immediately, I'm in the back corner, and tears are rolling down my face. And I look around this room full of warriors. There's not a dry eye in the house. Because in that moment, our CO had taught us that this was the enemy's fault. It was the enemy's fault. So the one that would pay dearly would be the enemy. He told us that the enemy is not going to gain a foothold in the heart and mind of our unit, that we're going to protect this house and we're not going to turn on one another. I will tell you this, the enemy paid dearly in the next few days. You had a group of Marines that were never as motivated or inspired as they were right there. In a moment where I expected to see this young man relieved, is I saw grace. I saw forgiveness, which led to inspiration. And for me, this continues to stay in my heart and in my mind because, guys, I'll be honest with you, is I want my house, I live about a mile from here. I want it to be just like that beat-up tent in Iraq. I want it to be a home of grace, forgiveness, inspiration. So to do that is I've got to continually ask myself a number of questions. How do I protect my house? What does that look like? Do I fight against those in my home, or do I fight for them? Maybe I'm passive. Maybe I've just given up leadership of my life. I'm just going to go through the motions. Do I assume the best from those in my home? Even when my wife and kids make mistakes, do I hold grudges against them? Do I offer forgiveness? What about the weight of my expectations? Am I putting unrealistic expectations upon my wife and my kids that they can't carry? It's not fair. What about me as a man? Do I hold myself to impossible standards so I walk around thinking I'm a constant failure? Or do I have no standards at all? What does it look like in my own heart? For us tonight is do I have a group of men around me that not only keep me accountable and work with me, but they walk alongside me, because what all of us know, whether on the battlefield or here tonight, that alone is dangerous. Alone is dangerous. What about my heart? Maybe I think I've done too much bad stuff in my life for a heavenly Father to even look in my direction. What are the questions that I ask myself? I want to build a home of grace, forgiveness, and inspiration. Tonight I want to close with another story. Is during my last deployment to Iraq, this was about 7 years later from that first story, is we were no longer really fighting against the Iraqis, as we were fighting with them. And so my assignment is on a 13-month deployment, and I was on what's called a MIT team, a military transition team. At this point, we weren't training Iraqis in tactics anymore, as we were helping them really to sustain an armed force. We were teaching them how to operationally plan. We were teaching them logistics. We were teaching them how to sustain a force. But I realized as soon as I got there, and I did a similar left seat, right seat that Mark talked about earlier, is the Iraqis that I was responsible for, is they needed some motivation. So I had to think, man, what could I do to get them to understand the importance of what they're doing? Well, fast forward 13 months later, is these Iraqis, so they gave me this. 2 days before I'm supposed to deploy back to Iraq, is they give me a sort of ceremonial rug. And I can open it up for you, but it's hard to see. But what you'll see across it is an interesting phrase in quotations. Remember the Alamo. Why would a group of Iraqis that I spent 13 months with give me a gift, and on that, they say that? Here's why. Because going back to realizing the motivation that I thought they needed is I told them the story of Colonel William Travis. How in the last long days of the Battle of the Alamo is he took a sword out, he drew a line in the sand, he looked at his men and he said, guess what, guys? You get to determine your fate. I've just drew a line in the sand. You can step across it, fight with me, and we can protect this place. Or you can retreat and leave. So I began to do that with my Iraqis before we would go out on certain combat patrols or resupplies, is I would draw a line in the sand and I would look them in the eye. I said, who's joining me today, guys? You get to choose your fate today. You get to step across this line, fight for a better country, for your family, for a hope, or you can stay within the compound. You can retreat for the day. So we would do that on numerous occasions. Men, for us, the line has already been drawn. Gil talked about it earlier. So my challenge for us is the same. If the line's been drawn, is what do? We've got two choices. We can stay and fight. We can protect our home. We can build a home of grace and forgiveness and inspiration. Or we can retreat and walk away. I don't know about you, but in my eyes, there's only one choice. Thanks.
All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and continue tonight with a little Q&A. But before we do that, I think it's appropriate that we acknowledge all of the veterans that are in the room tonight. Would you please stand if you've served in our military at any capacity? Please stand. Wow. Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Well, I don't know about you, but is anybody else ready to go attack hell with a water pistol? Or is it just me? I mean, I can listen to these guys all night long. Just pick one and I'm good for another 45 minutes, maybe an hour. But it's just been amazing. One more hand, guys, for these. Unbelievable. Thank you so much. Could not have asked for anything better than what these gentlemen have shared with us tonight. And once again, the last thing we want this to be is some kind of a pep rally, let's all get fired up. No, but it's more than that. It's an opportunity for us. It's like I heard 30 years ago. The decision to follow Christ is one of the most mental decisions that you'll ever make. We sometimes make it emotional, but it's not. And hopefully, many of you will leave here tonight making that decision to do what with the line? Let's cross the line, man. Whatever that means for you. It's different things for different people. Whatever that means for you, that's what we want to happen tonight. All right, Bobby, we have some questions.
Yeah, we got some questions. First one's coming right here, Todd.
Yeah. Hey, thank you. Mark, this is for you. So I know a lot of guys in this room probably are retired and maybe they finished a stint in the military. Maybe they're in transition from their work. And I'm curious if you could just talk about your transition from the military and how it impacted your identity and your belonging, because we seem to attach ourselves to a lot of that, our identity and belonging in our work. And what sustained you in that?
That's a loaded question. So fortunately for me, I was already in the reserve, so I did already have some type of transition, and I was a believer while I was there. And I have a whole nother story if y'all ever want to get into how I got saved. That's a whole different story. But as far as the transition goes, it's really the support system. Having other men to come alongside you and being able to talk about it. And like I said, this is the first time that I've talked about it openly to anybody outside the platoon. But even we had some believers inside the platoon, and I'm not saying that you need a believer to go talk to about it. I was just in a fortunate place to have that, but just having men to talk to. I'm dealing with demons from childhood right now that I've just recently started going to see a counselor about. But it's just recognizing that and facing that head on. So the transition for me was just having that support group and actually saying, hey, I need somebody to talk to. I need somebody to come alongside me and help me out. That's the biggest thing that I would say. That's how I transition. So again, but for me in Iraq and some of these memories that I have as a believer, I felt like I was very fortunate because God had a hedge of protection around my heart and around my mind. So there's some things that I don't have any issues dealing with, and then other things that I allow the enemy to come in and take advantage of that. So I don't know if that answers your question or not. But
Wow.
all right.
Thanks, Mark. I got a question back here for Jeff.
Yeah, this is probably back here. I'm up here, in line with a little bit what Mark said too. But Jeff, you look at times in our lives we've been really close to people, and we have whether you call it brotherhood, or you have strong friendships that got us through stuff. I think for you guys in the military, it's different on a far different level than a lot of us will ever experience. But once you're out of that, do you find, when you come back to civilian world or whatever you're doing now, do you find those same type of brotherhood relationships, or do you struggle to find them, or is it something that continues on? For those of us who haven't experienced that, and thank all of you guys here and here who have served, what's that like when you get back to the civilian world?
Okay, well, I'm in the National Guard, so I spend more time in the civilian world than I do in my uniform. But I can speak on behalf of a lot of veterans that have came to me lost. Like I said in my speech, that while you're active and deployed, you have a mission. You've got your platoon. You got your guys to your left and your right. You live a very regimented lifestyle. You're told where to be in what uniform and what time. You get out and you're kind of thrown to the wild. So I think it's real important that you find another mission. You find a group of like-minded people. I'm not going to try to turn this into a commercial for what I do for a living, but I've had a lot of veterans right here on the stage with me, even that have found a similar brotherhood in martial arts or in church or in some kind of group environment where you have the same value systems and you work hard, and I think you go through a struggle again together. I think most men need to be challenged in some way or another to better themselves, to feel like they can accomplish something, again, have that mission, have that goal, something to reach after. So my experience has been these guys that come back. I've had many soldiers, from privates to colonels, that have been in for 30 years or the shortest enlistment, and they come in and get plugged in with people that will give them something to aim for, something to keep them accountable. You need to be in class at this day. You need to be living. You need to be running, lifting, eating like this. Hey, man, why don't you come to church? Some of the guys back there have been to church with me. Just keeping each other accountable, having a real brotherhood that has an activity or a theme around it too. Not going to the bar, not doing something that is destructive, doing something that will build you up mentally, physically, and spiritually. Did that answer your question?
That's good. Mark or Brad?
I'm going to add one part
Yeah.
to that. Is my mic on? Can you hear me, Eric? Can you hear me now? There we go. Sorry. I want to just, one of the things that Jeff said, if you're a believer in the Bible, if you look in Scripture, in the Old Testament, before there were cities and countries and nations, they were called what? Tribes. In my life, I've always tried to have my tribe. I usually have a couple. Number one is going to be my home. That's going to be my first tribe. Second that I have is I've got a close group of guys here in this building. It's my tribe. Third that I found recently is where Jeff's at. Right? And so for me, is being able to have a tribe keeps me tied in. And so you ask a good question, is it hard? It's hard for all guys because we put on a front and we're afraid. right? We put on our front and we're afraid. I don't want to necessarily let anybody in. That's why I loved when I heard testimonies earlier. You've got different groups of pockets of people here that are getting past that. I think maybe this is a tipping point moment for a lot of men in our culture, especially those in this room. When I look at F3 and what they've been able to do. When I look at some of the Revolution guys here and what they've been able to do, and some others that I know in the room that are part of some CrossFit gyms and other things, is what you've seen guys a part of something bigger than themselves, right? They're able to go a place, get tore down a little bit, right? Somebody the other day said, Brad, you look like you've lost weight. I said, I don't know how. I eat humble pie every day at his gym, right? So all I do is go and get beat up, right? And every day I come back wanting more, right? When I come here and I'm able to pour into the life of other men, I come back wanting more. So I want to echo what Jeff said and what Mark said earlier is brotherhood is alone is dangerous.
That's good. So good. Let's see what time it is. We got time for one more question. We got Jeremy right up here. He's got a burning question. Jeremy, stand up. Did you stand up? Okay.
Thanks. You're like an inch taller than me. I'd like to hear from all three of you if we do have time. What are some struggles you guys face at home with your wife and kids, and how have your experiences helped you face those struggles?
I'm going to let these guys go first.
Whew.
I could church up my answer.
Everything.
No. We could be here for a while with that one, Jeremy.
So we have a joke in my house that I knew all my kids were going to be girls. All right, and that's just because of who I was a long time ago. And so how do we use that? I'm trying to make sure I understand the question. How do we use that? How do we use what we've done to guide at home, right? It's pretty much what you're asking. Well, most of the time I say this is how it's going to be, and I get overridden, right? It's hard. The biggest thing for me is leadership by example. So if I expect my girls, or even with my wife Judy, I try to do leadership by example. It doesn't mean that I do it well every single day. I mean, I feel like every day I fail, and then my girls usually point out all my flaws, right? And so for me, it's really just the leadership by example, and everything that I've done in the military, it's always leadership by example. Do as I do, right? Not do as I say, but do as I do. And so that, and it's a struggle for me sometimes, because I do want to just say, like I was in the Marines, hey, this is how we're going to do it, and this, don't ask why, let's just do it, right? And that doesn't work for 4 girls and a wife, right? That doesn't work. So for me, it really just comes back to leadership by example, and taking what I've learned in the Marine Corps, just in the military, and dealing with different people from all walks of life, because I think Brad was talking about this earlier, is we have so many different people in the military, right? And you have to learn, and I'm sure anybody that has a job, right? You've got to learn to deal with different people. Everybody's not. You can't lead. Like I can't lead every single one of my girls the same way. Like my youngest daughter, I have to lead her a different way, and I have to figure it out. And most of the time, that's my wife telling me this is how you have to teach her, right? And then. And just as each girl is different. I have to learn who they are and how they need to be led.
All right. So in the gym, I'm Professor Jeff. In the Army, I'm Sergeant Messina. At home, I got to be a good husband and father. So I try, and I struggle with this, is to be present and put my phone down. And to basically, I actually had one of my seniors back in the day tell me that you need to date your wife, or someone else will. You need to not get into the habit of just laying down and watching TV and going to bed in a routine. You've got to keep your friendship and the passion going, and you've got to be present with the people that are in your life, and try not to bring everything home. And it's probably one of my biggest struggles, and probably more with. I have anxiety, so I'm always doing a million things at the same time. And I think to really be present for your wife, be present for your children, and it's still difficult when you have to go away suddenly for a certain amount of time, and your wife now becomes the head of the household and has to run things. Now, I have You guys that know my wife, she's a very strong woman. And, it's a struggle that you have to constantly, like any relationship, reinvest yourself in and keep it fresh. So it's a good question, and it's not an easy thing to deal with for anybody, I don't think.
That's good. And Jeff, thank you. Brad, before you go, I know we got a ton of questions. These guys are going to be available afterwards. Come grab them, pick their brain, and all that stuff. But Brad, answer a question and wrap us up, man. Close us out.
Okay. To answer your question, biggest struggles, it's been different at different times. When you asked that, it sort of echoed what Jeff said. His current stage of life, man, I feel stretched really thin, to be honest with you. When I look in my house, I feel that way sometimes too. Like, man, we're just going in a lot of different directions. I've got 2 teenage boys. I mean, they're in the room. We're going a lot of places, and it seems like we're doing good things, but quite often I'm like, is it the best things? So for me, if you ask experiences and how it relates to that, I'll back up and tell you, like these guys, I don't know Jeff's life, I know more. I didn't have anything modeled at home. But I've told you before, dad's still in prison, brother's still in prison, broken home. So I didn't know what I was doing for a long time, and I screwed up in the beginning pretty bad. And so I've got a wife that built a home of grace and forgiveness that I talked about earlier that allows me to thrive now. But I feel currently stretched thin, right? And so I think it's priorities, making sure we're all on the same sheet of music, and knowing for me that what's my best yes. And so that's what I've been trying to do lately is prioritize those things. So guys, really for all of us as we close this night, on behalf of Mark and Jeff, is thanks for letting us speak to you. Because as we even talked and we prayed earlier tonight, is we're not the heroes of any of our stories. Jesus is. So our intent is not to get up here and say, look at us, look at the things that we've done, whether on the battlefield, in training, business. No. Let me just tell you a few lessons. So hopefully what you've got from this as you leave here tonight is that there's men here that are willing to move in your direction. That for you as a dad, for you as a husband, maybe you don't even fit any of those categories. Maybe you're here as a single man. There's still an enemy there, and there's still a line in the sand. So our challenge for you, if you think next steps, is there'll be some contact information up there. If you're like, what does this mean? I want to talk about this devotion that y'all had. It'll be on that back table. I want to get with a group of men. Get connected, text or call this number. Right? Because I'll tell you this. On the battlefield, the worst place to be is alone. Alone. So men, thanks for coming here tonight. Thanks for eating some food, for standing shoulder to shoulder with a brother next to you. It's an honor for all of us to be in this walk together. Let me pray for us. God, it's not lost on us that tonight in this room, there's plenty of men carrying some heavy stuff. Whether it's in their home, their job. So God, my prayer as we close is, first of all, is that those that don't know you as Father, as Lord, God, that they would just grab someone maybe here tonight and just ask some questions. Because if we try to do any of this on our own strength, it's going to fail. So God, I pray you would open our hearts to that. And God, I also pray for the men here that are wanting to lead well at home. God, they feel pulled in a lot of different directions, Father. I pray that you'd give them strength, endurance, wisdom. Your word says if we ask wisdom, that you would give it to us. So we ask for that. And so I pray, Lord, that you would give us the courage to be the type of men that you want us to be. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Guys, thanks for being here tonight. We love you.